Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to move on to how to draw more organic objects, so more nature-based objects. And for this, we're going to start with fruits because they have a cylindrical kind of volume to them, so it's just a nice progression from doing the bottles. And when we did the bottles, everything was very step by step, but because fruits are all so different from each other, each fruit will kind of have its own process. But I'll show you how to roughly break it down. So on your page, you're going to label this organic objects, and then you can put the date right here, whatever the date is for you. And so we're gonna do 3 different fruits today. We're gonna start with an apple, and then move on to a pear, and then we'll do a lemon whose axis is a little bit different. So with this, you really want to use a sketching pencil. And the first thing we want to do is get the axis of your fruit, whatever it is, because sometimes they won't lie straight flatly on the table the way that a bottle will. This one just kind of goes up and down evenly. Next, what we want to do is find the widest width of it. So this line that we make is roughly how tall I want my apple to be. And then I need to find the widest point, or the widest area, and I'm going to draw an ellipse there. So see how this compares to the height. Not quite as tall as it. So nice and wide. Doesn't need to be symmetrical, but this one is pretty symmetrical. After you have the widest point, you're going to find the tops and the bottoms. So the top, you can see, is a little bit tilted, and it's not quite as large as that widest point, but it is almost. So just right above and not quite as wide. And then there's a lot of space before we hit the bottom, which is a lot smaller. So decent amount of space in the bottom. Once you have these areas kind of figured out, if there's any rough shapes that'll help you, like over here I'll see, a circle shape, then if there's any defining shapes, you can add those in as well to help you make any connections. And you can kind of add in those shapes whenever you need them. Afterwards, we're going to skip and get to the stem of the apple. And so when I see people draw apples, you get this cute little tooth looking thing or heart, and then there's a stem that sticks out and then a leaf. And that looks like a really nice cartoon apple, but we really want to look and observe and see what things actually look like. And so with the stem, you can see there's this dip, because everything is heading in towards this core. And so we also want to indicate that dip in our actual apple that we're drawing. And then the stem isn't just a singular line. We do want to get the way that it curves and how high it goes beyond the back of the apple. But afterwards, we really want to give it some volume as well. So let it take up a little bit wider of the space and thicken it out. After you have the rough proportions of your fruit, you can deal with all the details of it. So there's a couple of nice bumps in there in the back that are going to give this apple a little bit more character. I want to go around and really look at those curves. And the nice thing about fruits and organic objects is things can look just a little bit different, and they'll probably still be convincing, whereas if a line is slightly off in a bottle, it'll suddenly look very strange and not realistic. So the organic objects are a little bit more forgiving with that. So let's write down our process really quickly. So the first one was that we found the axis line. Second, we found the widest area, drew that as an ellipse. Then we found the top and bottom. You can do that in whatever order. Find the top, find the bottom. And all those things you're comparing to one another, so the proportions of all those things are very important. Next, we made connections. Afterwards, we found the stem. And our last real step was to clean up and add details. So clean, curve, detail. All of those things will be important for us. And next time I'll show you how to make these look a little bit cleaner and more interesting with their line work. A special extra step is to look for transitions and defining shapes. So that circle that we added in earlier. So those are our steps. Next we're going to move on to a pear. So a little bit different of a shape to deal with. So this time when we find our axis line, you can see that it's a little bit tilted, and I use the stem and the bottom of it to help me figure out how it's sitting. So this time we're going to draw a little bit of a tilt to this. Then we're going to find the widest area, also a bit tilted. And you see that it's more towards the bottom now. So towards the bottom of this, and pretty wide. Then we find the bottom, so give this a little bit more space. Find the bottom, pretty small. And then the top this time is going to be kind of larger and very tilted. Again, if there's any defining shapes, like at the bottom here, I see a nice round area. So I'll draw a circle really quickly. Then I can make any connections. Gonna find my stem. Again, there's that little dip right here, so just a curve right there. And my stem this time goes up and out, kind of like a straw. So up, out, and then I'm going to treat it like a very skinny cylinder. Again, giving it a little bit of depth. And so, when we're at the details point, we're going to deal with this leaf. Now, when people draw leaves, again, they tend to make up a perfect kind of leaf shape. They add in these harsh lines. And none of that's necessary. It's just important that you look at what's actually happening. So with this leaf, it's curving down, and it goes pretty far down. So almost halfway down my actual shape, and it comes out of the top here. So coming out of the top, and then down almost halfway. One side will look a little bit different than the top side, which is more like a hill. And then you can lightly put in the lines if you'd like to. I tend to think they're not super necessary. At least not every single one of them, and definitely not dark. So some detail, and then I can clean some stuff up, make any adjustments I think are necessary. And curve out those edges. Just the shape at the bottom a little. There you go. Take a step back to think if this shape looks accurate. If it got too long, then maybe make it shorter. If it got too wide, then make it a little thinner. Whatever adjustments you need to make so that these look more similar. And so the very last one we're going to do is this lemon, which has a different axis than before. And so the axis on this one, instead of going vertically, is going horizontally. So it's resting on its side. So we're also going to make a horizontal line. we still need to find the widest point, which is right in the middle this time. Find the top, small, all the way at the end, and the bottom right here. And what I notice is that's interesting is there's this triangular shape that's kind of jutting out. So I'm going to make kind of like a cone sticking out right there. And then the rest of the shape is connected similarly to an oval. I'll have to adjust that a little bit, but the oval is a nice basis to make sure everything is nice and round. This time I'm not dealing with a stem, so I can skip that step. And instead just focus on the actual shape itself and all these details. What's also nice about fruits, the ones that we tend to look at anyways, are that they're similar to spheres almost, like if it was a cylinder and a sphere kind of mashed together more naturally. And so when you deal with shading, which you'll eventually have to do, you'll see that this hits similarly to a sphere where you'll have a highlight and you'll have your core shadow and you'll have your cast shadow kind of going around like you would with a sphere. And we'll get to shading eventually. Next time we'll do some clean lines